We are going to be covering the Monaco Grand Prix this week. A Grand Prix that, it was fair to say, a very eventful first hour, even if it wasn't on the racetrack. But even when we did get onto the racetrack, the first 30-odd laps, very good. And then the last 30 sort of regressing back into traditional Monaco. We'll obviously be discussing that race. We'll also be discussing Monaco's place on the calendar. Obviously, it's one of the longest events, or one of the race that's probably been on the calendar the longest, maybe with Silverstone and Monza. But is it time to move on? The track, obviously, not very suited for modern F1 cars. We saw, and we'll talk about it later, Fernando Alonso managing to circulate 3.5 seconds slower than Lando Norris ahead of him, but realistically being at no threat of being overtaken. So we'll discuss Monaco, whether it deserves to be on the calendar. We'll also discuss that hectic start, rain coming just before the start of the race, or reports of the FIA losing power, meaning the race had to be delayed, pushing us back into the torrential rain, which caused another half an hour long delay. Were they being too safe? Should they have just sent them out? Or do you think they would have sent them out had we not had that alleged power cut at the FIA? We'll also talk about what happened in the race as well. Mick Schumacher, is he coming under pressure? Second crash this season, second major crash this season. We'll talk Ferrari strategy, seemingly rehiring their strategist from 2017 and 2018 this race. Falling behind the Red Bulls, or Leclerc falling from first to fourth. Carlos Sainz would have capitalised, but staying in second. And Perez taking his first Monaco Grand Prix victory and getting himself back into the championship, just 15 points behind Max Verstappen. But obviously, I can't do this on my own, so as ever, I am joined by some lovely guests, starting off with my old co-host, Jack. How are you doing, Jack?
I'm not doing too bad, thanks. Apart from, the old exam stuff. Perhaps, maybe I could have wished for a slightly more interesting race at the weekend, but as Monaco goes, it was interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we got an interesting first half of the race, I think you'd have to say. And when it comes to Monaco, that's sort of the best you can hope for.
Yeah, but even then we had to wait for 45 minutes before the race started, didn't we? So
one sporting event that I watched that started on time, that was all I asked for this weekend. It didn't happen. We've also got, as ever, my co-host Chinmay. How are you doing, Chinmay?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, just finished exams this morning, so
I'm so jealous of you. I have 4 more exams. Yeah. I missed Monaco qualifying because I was doing an exam during it.
Oh, that's bad. But
I missed the best bit of Monaco.
Yeah, I think. But yeah, it was a bit. As Monaco starting to go, this was actually a good Monaco race considering. But yeah, it's something needs to be done about the racing now. But
yeah, and making his debut on the show, we've got Shane. How are you doing, Shane?
Hello, I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
No, that's all right.
And I'm excited to talk about what I thought was a Monaco GP, which has been the best in a while, in my personal opinion. So,
yeah, and we'll dive straight into it actually. With Monaco in general, obviously, as I was saying before I introduced my guest, Monaco is in a weird spot at the moment. Liberty Media seemingly less and less happy with it being on the grid, less and less happy to both accommodate what does tend to be not a great race. And realistically, had it not rained, it wouldn't have been a great race. I mean, we saw that by the end of the race, obviously, with just Alonso being trundling around at 0 speed, Perez coming under a lot of pressure but managing to hold it off. And also, they're not willing to compromise with the demands made by the Automotive Club de Monaco. I think the race organisation that runs the Monaco Grand Prix, obviously bespoke sponsors they're not happy with. They pay much less to host a race and aren't willing to accommodate potential changes to the track that can make the racing better, such as, I guess, removing the Nouvelle Chicane, for example. Jack, do you think the Monaco Grand Prix is under threat?
Oh, I hope it is. I'm so biased against it. I really do like good racing above all else. And I think It's such a depressing outlook. I think Liberty Media going to all the big fancy places, whatever else. I seem to say so often, but I do think it is true that if we were to take Monaco off the calendar, it would not be missed for very long. Okay, the first 3-4 years, people go, we're missing the crown jewel, but Formula E is still going to be there, and they've had some incredible racing. That is the circuit that fits those cars perfectly. So just give it to them. It's fine by me, and I would be all the happier for it.
I mean, Chinmay, obviously, we've seen good races at Monaco in the past. 1996 is one that stands out in particular, just 4 drivers finishing. Olivier Panis taking his only win. And as Jack said there, we've seen good races at Monaco with Formula E, but do you think we've outgrown Monaco in a way? Obviously, the car's so quick, so much downforce, that they basically... The DRS doesn't matter on the start-finish straight. They're basically, especially in the wet, they're basically accelerating for about 6-7 seconds and then having to brake for turn 1. Do you think that F1 has outgrown Monte Carlo?
I think, yes, both physically, and I think it just genuinely has. The racing is not great anymore. The fact that we have an overtake, but is most likely going to be missed by the TV direction, and we'll see Lance Stroll jumping over curves instead. But yeah, I feel that especially with Formula One, they're going to so many more other glamorous places. We've got Las Vegas coming up next year. We've just had Miami. We have other places that really hold glamour. That I don't think Monaco just has that sort of stance as much as it did compared to recent years, and mainly just because of how globalized Formula One has become now. So I wouldn't be surprised if Monaco does not turn to the grid in the next few years anymore. And it won't really be missed, like Jack said.
And obviously, Shane, Chinmay was mentioning there the glamour races. Obviously, Monaco has sort of remained on the calendar, I think, for a few years longer, or the discussions weren't being had for a few years longer because it was that jewel in the F1 crown. It was the glitz, it was the glamour, it was like the old money, the casino square, things like that. But with Liberty Media coming in, we're seeing more and more of those glitzy glamour races, especially in America. We saw the Miami Grand Prix a few weeks ago. We're going to go to Las Vegas next year. Do you think that them bringing in the races, Liberty Media bringing in these races in America, removes sort of like that dual status that even if Monaco wasn't the best race, it was still unique in how celebrities would flock to it and things like that? But if we've got these races that are both in America and also better at racing, do you think that they're going to... That's just another thing that removes Monaco from potentially being on the calendar?
I get what you're saying, but Monaco is obviously this whole glamorous event and everything, and Liberty Media bringing in these American races, which are also full of glamour, it does remove part or most of what Monaco is why it's special. But I'm going to go a different route from Jack and Chinmay here and say Monaco should stay on the calendar. I love the event. I think it's great. I think possibly it shouldn't stay on for every year. Maybe intervals, but it is, after all, it's part of the Triple Crown, the Le Mans Indy, which we had yesterday, and the Monaco GP. It's just that special. It has to stay, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the point. I mean, the Triple Crown would go. If we got rid of the Monaco Grand Prix, you wouldn't be able to hold it. I mean, there have been alternatives proposed. I think I read today that they were thinking of holding it biennially as opposed to once every year. I mean, Jack, are there changes that you would make that could potentially save the Grand Prix?
I don't see what you can do. I genuinely don't. It's just, number one, you've got the ACM that are pushing back on everything because they want to keep it as is. And you just can't build into the harbour or into a hotel or wherever else. You can't put more track down or make major changes to it. It is as it is, I'm afraid. If I wanted to make changes, then I might make the cars electric and smaller and lighter and a bit more suited. There it is. We just have... I've been looking back through the last few years, and I think we haven't seen an overtake for the lead of the race since 2016. So in 6 years, 6 years of driving and no one has ever overtaken for first place.
Did we see an overtake in 20s? I know, obviously...
I'm still looking through.
I know Ricciardo lost the lead to Hamilton in the pit stops, that one. But I can't remember if we've seen the lead for an overtake in Monaco for a very long time, if ever. Obviously, there are always ideas proposed in the back of my mind. Changing the circuit, obviously, there's less would work. I was saying you can't build into the marina, but I mean, they have built, and obviously we saw at the, what's the corner before the tunnel? Tabac?
Something like that. I'm not very good.
The corner before the tunnel.
Yeah.
But they've obviously they've reclaimed land there. Could they have done maybe more with that? Or other things like removing the Nouvelle chicane or editing it so maybe it's a bit further back, bit easier to overtake. Putting DRS in the tunnel, I've always wondered why they haven't done that. Obviously, it's quite a narrow point, but if you just give them the DRS, they're going to be making the overtake into the chicane as opposed to in the tunnel, because we've seen drivers in the past. I think Massa in 2011 stands out the most. Like, if you get on the marbles in the tunnel, you're going straight into the barrier. Do you think there are ways to improve the circuit and make it better for racing, or do you think that it's just living on borrowed time at the moment?
I think it's more living on borrowed time, to be honest. I think the problem is with Monaco, because it's a street circuit, is literally public roads that they race on, and especially with how dense the country, Monaco as a country is, you can't really do much to widen much of the tracks, and like Jack said, the ACM, they're just going to push back everything anyway, so realistically there's not going to be any change being made. Even if you put DRS in the tunnel, you're not on the throttle for that long, and I don't think that tunnel is long enough for DRS to make any effect, especially with the new cars having very weak slipstreams compared to last year.
It's a tough one, isn't it, Shane? Because obviously we want Monaco on the calendar. It's glamorous. It's like, it is part of the Triple Crown, and it would be a shame to lose something like that, especially as the Monaco Grand Prix falls on the same day as Indy. But I watched Indy, like, way more riveting. Obviously, well done to Marcus Ericsson for winning that race as well. And another thing is it's the TV direction. Like, it's another thing, obviously, that's unique about Monaco. They put their own TV direction out, but it's just not good, is it?
It's just not good enough. Like, during qualifying, we saw Leclerc was on a lap and Perez sliding into the camera as Leclerc was just going through the tunnel, and it took quite a bit of time before they actually cut to Perez in the barrier, and then by that time Sainz has already hit Perez, and it's not until the complete end of qualifying where we see Alonso's in the wall suddenly, which we didn't know about. So I think the TV direction there is just not good enough. They missed too many important moments, and I think they should just give it to F1 to deal with instead of doing it in-house.
Yeah, and I mean, Chinmay, do you think that if the Monaco Grand Prix is to stay on the calendar, concessions have to be made? Do you think maybe this race has given a bit of a respite, because it wasn't great, but it was decent. It was like a fairly standard average race as opposed to being like an absolute snooze fest. But if we get in 2023 another very boring race, do you think that concessions will have to be made by the ACM to F1? Because F1 can just say, we're not going to put you on the calendar unless you do this. It's quite a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I think concessions will have to be made, probably even after watching this race, because even as we saw the last 35 minutes of the race, when it became a standard Bonjour Monaco, it was very boring. I mean, all we saw was Fernando Alonso just backing up the entire grid and ruining Ocon's race because of his 5-second penalty. But the ACM will have to become a lot more flexible, and Formula 1 need to actually put their foot down, especially with TV direction, because I think TV direction is just what really ruins it. I mean, we saw last year that the one overtake with Gasly and Vettel was overridden by Stroll. This year, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Russell made an overtake on Norris. That was completely missed out on the TV direction.
We missed the Ocon-Hamilton. Obviously, we saw the first Ocon-Hamilton incident, missed the second one, which was a lot more. We missed the one that got him the penalty. The graphics as well seem to be all bugged. I'm not sure if that was an F1 thing or a Monaco thing, but they didn't seem to know what was going on, who was on what tyres, what gaps were there. It just isn't what you expect from what is one of 22 F1 races, which are high level, like highest level of motorsport, and B, it's Monaco. It's like the one that's meant to be the high of the high. It's meant to be the jewel in the F1 crown. I mean, Jack, how long do you see Monaco staying on the calendar for, or do you think that this could be the last Monaco Grand Prix?
No, it could be there indefinitely. There's no, there's definitely not a consensus within the public that it's dead and buried. Yeah, I think it's going to be a long process to get it removed, and we'll see probably more iterations of regulation that mean that the cars can overtake better and keep going that direction, because that's the way Liberty Media want it. But I think at the end of the day, like for me at least, this race was the chance for Monaco to redeem itself. We were meant to have this dramatic change in racing, and it has produced better racing, no doubt. I don't think anybody would question that, but it's just not enough to fix what is just not quite the right track anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, Chinmay, just to finish this off, do you think the cars can help? Obviously, we've got these very large cars at the moment. Adrian Newey obviously saying he thinks the cars are too large, and you'd have to say that it, along with the whole new engine side, along with the biofuel and things like that, the FIA are looking for 2026 to bring the size of the cars back down to probably what we nearly saw with like 2010 to 2016 levels size-wise. Do you think that if we do that, and maybe if the TV direction is changed, if less is being given to the control of the ACM, we maybe even get some track changes, DRS in the tunnel, Nouvelle chicane being reprofiled to make overtaking a bit easier, because even that corner is exceptionally difficult to overtake on unless you've got like a massive overspeed. And Guan Yu Zhou, how he saved that, I will never know. But do you think that if everything goes right, do you think Monaco can be saved?
I think definitely. I mean, yeah, like I said, the cars need to be a bit smaller on that track. The current F1 cars it's not just long, but it's mainly the width that's the problem. Because like through the tunnel, they can barely go 2 cars wide. Well,
you seem to be able to just put a car in the middle of the track. I don't think it's not. It's probably more than 3 cars wide, but it's not more than, like, you can just like jink over to, if you can see which way, or Ocon could see which way Hamilton was going and just move over to the left a bit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Perez could see which way Sainz was going and move over to the right. Like, the track isn't wide enough. But do you think that, I guess, if they do get wider, if they do get shorter, because obviously you've got to have the distance, you've got to be past the car.
Yeah, 100%.
So do you think if everything happens, do you think we will get another good Monaco Grand Prix?
I think 100% we possibly can. I mean, it's still a street circuit. We could still have destruction.
I found the last overtake for the lead. It was 2008.
Ooh.
When
was that Hamilton on Massa or Raikkonen?
It was Massa going wide, and then Kubica took the lead at Sandoval.
Oh, I love the Sandoval runoff area. Because it's just they just don't bother going for the corner, and they just go left instead of right, and it's quite funny to watch. We are going to take a quick break now. We're going to come back. We're going to obviously discuss how the ACM might be ruining the Monaco Grand Prix. We're going to discuss how the FIA might have ruined this Monaco Grand Prix in particular. Welcome back to the Warwick F1 show, and we are going to move on to what was the complete and utter mess of the start. So the rain, initially about 2 hours before the race, it didn't look like any rain was coming in, and I was fearing the worst. It was just going to be a boring, dry Monaco Grand Prix, but the rain finally arrived. And Jack, it somehow managed to find a way to arrive at the worst possible moment, because this is F1 and we never get lucky with the weather.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could have been worse. It could have, we could have had Spa last year, and I was genuinely concerned that we weren't going to get a race for a bit. But yeah, it wasn't quite as ideal as maybe we would have liked.
Yeah, but think of the scenes if it arrived half an hour later. We're 20 laps in, and rain arrives, and Spa is, and Monaco is suddenly the best race ever. But it arrived at about 5 to 2 or 5 to 2 our time.
Yeah.
So the start was delayed to 9 minutes past the hour. I mean, Chinmay, would you say that delay was probably justified? In the, like, they obviously have basically put the tyres on, they're getting ready to start. If enough rain is falling, you can't make them start on like dries on what is an intermediate track. So would you say that in and of itself, ignoring any safety car decisions that we'll maybe come on to in a few seconds, was it the right decision to maybe delay the start 10 minutes?
Yeah, 100%, because it would just end up being a red flag after that, with everybody just crashing to the barriers with slicks.
Everyone would be performing heroics into Sandoval.
Literally everybody.
It would have been very insane. But this is where it sort of began, Shane. So they've delayed the start, fairly reasonable, need to put some tyres on. Then they announce the start is going to be behind the safety car. And one thing about this is that it means all drivers have to go onto the extreme wet tyre, regardless of what they sort of want to do. Because at that time, it sort of did look like an intermediate track, didn't it? It was a track that was very suited for inters, but to go onto full wets maybe wasn't the best decision. I mean, what do you think of the decision to maybe put them behind the safety car?
Well, a note was brought up about the fact that if the cars are on behind safety car in the first place, they should be on extreme wets, because otherwise they wouldn't need to be on extreme wets for it to actually be on the safety car. But to go behind the safety car, I don't think was probably not the right decision, because the tyres are going to be cold. The cars are travelling at 70 miles an hour probably around the track. Their tyres are going to be freezing cold. Everyone's going to be sliding around, and I think it probably should have just been a formation lap. Their tyres would have been nice and toasty, and they could have got going.
Yeah, I think just a side note, I don't think a standing start was actually possible anyway, because of the power cut. So the actual starting lights weren't working, so they had to do a rolling start anyway.
Yeah, it was all leading up to being like a perfect start. If it had started at 4, and I think I saw a tweet that had like sort of the starting tyres, and it was like the top 4 were all on like dry tyres. I think the Mercedes and Norris were on inters. I think the Williams were even on softs, a few people on hards, a few people on mediums. It would have been insane if it had started on time. So it's almost like we were so close, so you could just see like a glimmer of success from the Monaco Grand Prix, Chinmay. But it just went wrong with this power cut, didn't it?
Yeah, it literally just ruined any chance we had of actually having a decent start to the race. Just the whole running start just ruins everything, to be honest.
Yeah. If I'd thought of this before the race, I wonder what the last race was that we never had a standing start at. Because we didn't have a standing start at this race. I wonder what the last one. I'll have to think about that. See if I can think of any examples. And I can see Jack's mind wearing away now.
I don't know why I bother thinking, because I've got the memory of a goldfish when it comes to racing. But you know, if anybody could do it, Will could do it. It's fine.
Yeah, right. I'll think this while you're all answering my questions. But obviously, we went round behind the safety car. Then the heavens opened. Like, it was properly tipping it down. I think we can all agree that red flag was probably justified. I mean, it was biblical rain showers. And then obviously went to the red flag, waited half an hour, and then went racing. Should the race have maybe started just at... Like, this is something, and that Martin Brundle was saying, especially on the commentary, Jack, that we've learnt nothing from Spa, and it really appeared like we had learnt nothing from Spa. Let's say the race starts at 2 o'clock our time. Realistically, we get the first 10 minutes into maybe, or you'd think that the people who'd gambled on the soft tyre fall back. Then maybe the heavens open. Realistically, someone probably crashes. Then the red flag is thrown. These are the top 20. These are the top 20 of the top drivers in the world. I was about to say top 20. Then remember, a few drivers on the grid exist. But so these are 20 of the top. One of them crashed under the safety car.
Yes,
at the slowest corner on the track. Like, please, come on. But these are 20 of the top drivers in the world. we should be trusting them that they can race in wet conditions.
Yeah, I think obviously last year was under Michael Massey, and we've got different race directors. I'm sure that makes something of a difference between the two races, here in Spa. But it does feel like, in some ways, it feels like the power loss is the only thing that makes sense. Like, they should have just, a flow chart or just something. Is it wet right now? Yes, no, here's what you do, and here's what the consequences of that are. But it doesn't feel like anybody was kind of quite clued in the right way. So yeah, that was frustrating. It really was. And then I think at the time the decisions were ludicrous, and then the longer it went on, the more it was like, this isn't such a terrible idea. But still, yeah, I think we could have raced in that, no problem.
Yeah. And I mean, Chinmay, do you think that they were guilty of radar watching? Obviously, they were saying they were monitoring like a big, what ended up being the big, like, heavy shower coming in that came in about 1:15 the hour. But it's not really up for, it shouldn't be, do you think that it shouldn't be up for the FIA to decide? Realistically, the red flag probably would have been thrown, and it definitely should have been thrown. I think the red flag, or initial red flag, was the decision that most people were the happiest with, because it was absolutely tipping it down. Yeah. But realistically, it should have come after 10 laps of racing conditions. It should have come after 10 laps where some people had gambled on the dries and probably would have fallen back. Some people were on the inters. We could have had like Lando Norris, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton up at the front. Do you think the FIA were too cautious?
I would say they were a tad too cautious, yes. I mean, I don't understand safety concerns, especially with just the problem with being Monaco. It's such a narrow track, and if the cars are generating, especially with the wet tyres, they just generate so much spray nowadays because the tyres are actually much wider than they were 10 years ago. I can't understand why they would do it, but I do feel, like you said, we could at least had about 6, 7, 8 laps of good slip-sliding racing, because it's Monaco, you're going slow speeds anyway.
I mean, and Shane, do you think that... I forgot my question. Let me try it and think of it quickly. But do you think that this has been the second time this season we've had a wet race, and we saw quite cautiousness at Imola as well, taking vastly, well, I think most people accepting that it took way too long for the DRS to come out there. This is, I mean, it's a trend that's beginning to develop, that the race directors don't seem to trust the drivers in wet conditions, trust them to be safe, when realistically 20 of the best drivers in the world, they should be able to handle the car in these conditions.
It is becoming a trend. Obviously, yeah, as Jack said, we have new race direction now, and I think they're just very inexperienced. They don't, it's not a bad thing, obviously they're going to be inexperienced, but they just don't have the knowledge or experience to know when it's time to just get down to it and go racing, because they're leaving it too long, they're being too cautious. The DRS doesn't open in Imola for so many laps, and they just left it way too long this time as well before the race started. So,
and I guess, speaking of things taking too long, do you think that the process, Jack, needs to be shortened? Because obviously we saw the red flag coming out, then it's always like a 10-minute delay. It's like a 10-minute announcement. We've got to wait another 10 minutes. Obviously you want to have the teams ready, but surely you tell them in advance, and maybe, or just announce it earlier, because you've got to think forward. Let's say it's not rained for a while, or it's not rained for a minute or two, and it doesn't look like it's going to rain any further. Why not throw that 10 minutes now? And obviously, wait, like, those 10 minutes that it's drying up are the 10 minutes that we're getting ready, as opposed to waiting another, 10 minutes, then throwing the 10 minute, and then we've just wasted 20 minutes on a drying track. And obviously, F1, if we want it to be about entertainment, and especially at Monaco, where entertainment is very, very, scarce, surely we want to make it we want to get on a wet track, or as wet as possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration comes from sitting around and not being sure what you're waiting for. So giving 10 minutes until a decision made might on the surface seem like you're doing something, but it's really not. They do need to say, they need to say either we'll be looking at this again in 10 minutes, make it clear that the decision hasn't been made, what's going on, this is a temporary pause, and make that very clear, or say the race will start in 10 minutes. It's difficult to say, obviously, at the time, but it did feel like there were times when, especially during the red flag period later, when it just felt like you're waiting for the track to be fully dry rather than safe, and there is a difference between the two. So, yeah, I mean, it's so easy to look back on it now, but I can't tell what's going on behind the scenes. It's a little frustrating, and it does seem simple. Just, yeah. Don't know. And
I mean, I said something like this in obviously the chat, the Warwick F1 WhatsApp group, is that this should be what the team radio or the team radio to the race directors was used for. It should be about, obviously we can't, like, Crofty and Brundle can't be talking to Niels Wittek, who, like, up there in race control, but it should be either Chauvelin or like Adrian Newey or like Christian Horner talking to them, and then we hear it. We're asking, like, Christian Horner obviously asking either, like, why was the start delayed? Why has the red flag gone on for so long? Because even all the team bosses that we seem to speak to were like, there probably wasn't a reason this start should have been delayed. But if we just didn't know the answer, did we? And that was probably the most frustrating thing.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, I get why they stopped broadcasting radio, because last year it just got the pettiness between Mercedes and Red Bull just go way too out of hand, just trying to push around Michael Massey. But I feel, I kind of 100% agree that, at least we should know, we should be kept more in the loop a little bit, because the fact that we're just saying that, not knowing what's happened, just the race randomly getting delayed after what was at least for the first 5-10 minutes pretty normal-ish rain, where people could just race in full wets for 5, 6, 7 laps. And I do feel that it just, the FIA and F1 just being a bit too cautious with some bits.
Yeah, and I mean, Shane, I guess just to finish off with this segment, this is now the second time that we've had rain sort of mess up a start, and we've been very in the dark about what is going on with, like, the race start. Obviously in Spa last year, maybe could have gone racing, maybe it was very touch and go as to whether it would have been safe. This one seems very like they were being overly cautious. What do you think the FIA needs to learn from this? Obviously, if it was a power issue and you had to delay it and then the rain just came at an unlucky time, even if that was thing, do you just think they need to be more communicative, need to be less cautious? I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think you often hear drivers like Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton sometimes saying, why aren't we racing? They're driving behind a safety car and saying it's perfectly fine to race, why aren't we racing? We should probably get an answer to those questions from the drivers by the race direction. They could broadcast whatever the race direction has to say about that, and then we could be kept in the loop. We will be more understanding about what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they manage to learn from these mistakes. Hopefully we get a few more wet races this season. Maybe, hopefully, the rain is timed slightly better. Just either come just a bit before, or just, it never happens where it comes just after the start, is it? It's never 10 minutes after the start where they're like 5 laps in and then all dive in for wet tyres. We never see that. Or just on the format, when are we getting another 2007 Nürburgring where Nicholas Latifi dives into the pit lane, comes out and is a minute and a half ahead of the field before binning it into a gravel trap? When is that going to happen? We need it to happen. But we will take another break now. We are going to move on to the race, actually. We're going to discuss, I guess, the first big event of the race and the second red flag, obviously. Mick Schumacher, and is he under pressure in that second Haas seat? There's one driver who seems to be under a lot of it right now. That is Mick Schumacher. Obviously, coming off the back of a very good qualifying performance in Spain, looking like he had maybe alleviated some of his early season form, but losing it at the swimming pool chicane and binning it in the barrier. I mean, first off, looked like quite a violent crash. Obviously, I think a lot of people maybe were thinking, Chinmay, why has the back come off? But as we can reveal, it's a design now, isn't it?
Yeah, or a little bit of a conspiracy theory. You probably have Whiplash from Iron Man 2 somehow just appear out of nowhere and just cut the car in half.
Oh my god!
It happened in that scene was also in the Monaco Grand Prix.
It was the historic Monaco Grand. Oh, we haven't even spoken about the historic Monaco. How Leclerc crashed. He crashed.
That's all you need to say, isn't it?
What?
That's all you need to say about it, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, he crashed Niki Lauda's Ferrari and back to the normal race. But yes, so the back coming off the car, it was fine. But is Schumacher under pressure, Shane? Obviously, he hasn't scored a point now. His run before his first point finish is actually longer than Nicholas Latifi's. Is he under pressure?
I think he's very much under fraud watch at the moment. I think it's obvious he's been. I think he's been sometimes quite unlucky with strategy from Haas, but at the end of the day, he's not delivering, and he's not beating Kevin Magnussen, which he should be doing realistically. I think Haas has taken a bit of a step back recently as well. They were very strong in Bahrain and very strong in Jeddah, but their car can still compete and it can still definitely score points. And he's just not scoring those points, and he's having some pretty major crashes.
Yeah, and obviously Kevin Magnussen retiring with a water leak as well. You mentioned Kevin Magnussen there, and he came in initially coming 5th place in Bahrain. Probably, I mean, it would have been 7th without the Red Bulls retiring, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Coming straight back in, obviously, he is an experienced F1 driver, out of the sport for a year, Jack. Do you think that Kevin Magnussen shouldn't be showing up Schumacher in this way?
I think they should be a lot closer than they are, certainly. You don't come out of F2 as a champion and then go and do nothing, right? We've seen so many good drivers come out of F2 or GP2 and do good things. You look at Leclerc, you look at Russell, you look at De Vries, even, he's not in F1, but he still went and won Formula E. He's still a very good driver, and just, Callum Isler also, who pushed Schumacher for that title, has gone away, and he's not very good in IndyCar, and it just feels like that year was a bit naff now. Sonoda's not pulling his weight either, and we don't need to say anything about Mazepin, do we? So it does feel like that year's just been underwhelming. And maybe if I'm not really thinking about Formula 1, I'm more thinking about what that says for Formula 2, but he should be much closer than he is. I would say that they should be looking to be within a tenth of each other, and that would be acceptable for the Haas drivers, for both of them. But no, this is too far. This is unacceptable for him.
Yeah. And Chinmay, do you think that he is going to stay in the sport maybe not a bit longer than his form deserves, but do you think that Schumacher name will play a role in it?
It's a Schumacher name. It definitely will play a role. I think if Schumacher, unless he somehow does worse than he has been performing, obviously if that happens, he'll probably be even kicked out at the end of this year. But I think Schumacher will definitely have at least another year in sport to at least try and prove himself, because technically this is Schumacher's debut year. You can technically say, because last year he was in that house with...
Oh. Yeah.
Technically, you can... I'm not really.
Technically it would be the other way around. You could argue that figuratively it's his rookie year, but I don't think that's fair either, because... we're not saying the same for Tsunoda or anyone else. I think despite the fact he hasn't raced anyone, he's still got so much more track time than an actual rookie would.
True.
I mean, do you think, especially as Haas started very well, Shane, but they've fallen back, obviously have made it clear they haven't bought any upgrades. I mean, do you think it's time? They both retired from this race, weren't looking especially strong throughout either. Do you think that it's time for them to bring upgrades? Obviously they've said they want to get the understanding of the car now, but the fact is they're falling back. They're back to 8th in the Constructors' Championship behind AlphaTauri, who have also been very lacklustre. this season. Are upgrades on the horizon?
Absolutely, they need to bring upgrades. They were third in the championship at, I believe, after Jeddah. It might have been Mercedes might have overtaken them after Jeddah, but they've been third and they've fallen back to 8th.
I think they were third. They were third after Bahrain, weren't they?
Yeah, they were third after Bahrain. Yeah, definitely. But it's really what a fall from grace, really. It's they have a very strong Ferrari power unit in the back. It just seems like the car itself is not performing. And I remember there was a stat about their porpoising gets a lot worse towards the end of a race when their fuel load starts to decrease and their car becomes lighter, and the porpoising just rapidly increases, which is why their race pace at the end is just terrible.
Yeah. And do you think, Chinmay, that these upgrades need to come before Schumacher starts performing? Obviously, we've seen that accidents breed accidents, especially, I guess, the best example this season has been Carlos Sainz. Obviously, on a 17 race point streak, loses it in Australia, loses it in Imola, maybe a bit less due to his own fault, loses it in Spain, dropping back after that spin into the gravel trap. Do you think there's two paths Schumacher can take? The upgrades come and he gets back to full form, or do you think that we might see a few more incidents and questions might start to grow about his future?
I think there'll probably be a few incidents and questions will start to grow, but I think Schumacher just needs that. He needs that one good result. He'll need a strong points finish at least to start building his confidence. Cause I think he just lost a lot of confidence because of all these incidents that are happening now. Monaco wouldn't have helped in anywhere at all.
Yeah, and I guess, Jack, is it going to be like a George Russell? Obviously, Russell, for a long time, I think we can probably take the Sakir Grand Prix out of the equation in terms of point scoring. Obviously, jumping into what was by far the quickest car that season, arguably almost the quickest car that F1 has ever seen in the 2020 Mercedes. But other than that, in the Williams, obviously seemingly looking so close to points every time, but never really being able to get them. And then he gets points in Hungary. He then gets obviously points in Belgium. I guess maybe a bit less, but we won't talk about the Belgian Grand Prix of 2020. Does very well in the qualifying in Russia. Almost gets points there. Do you think that it's going to be like that with Schumacher? He's going to get one points finish, and then the rest will start to follow?
Yeah, it could be a floodgate situation, but I don't think I'd like to compare it to Russell, because I think what was so impressive about Russell's run is that there's no way that Williams should have been scoring points, whereas the Haas very much should be at this point in time. So yeah, I definitely can see him building confidence, and I do think, his racing is somewhat random. When your mistakes will come is not always, every 30th lap or every 50th lap, whatever. There'll be a few races that you go and you won't make any mistakes at all, and then that'll build confidence and you'll get some points there. So yeah, I'm sure that will happen. But I wouldn't say he's Russell level.
Yeah, and I guess just finally, Chinmay, obviously Schumacher's had this trend in the past. We saw it in F3, we saw it in F2, that his first season fairly average, and then it's into the second season, especially into the second half, or like the middle of the second season, he suddenly just clicks and he's like on another level. We saw it, like, obviously F3 wins that title. We saw it in F2 after, I think, about Hungary, he overhauled about 45 point deficit to win that title. We're into his second season now, as you're saying, maybe effectively his first. Like, that 2021 Haas, probably the worst car for a long, long time. Do you think we're going to see that? Do you think we'll see in the middle of the season he's just suddenly going to switch on like he seems to have always done?
Hopefully. I mean, like I said, he is known to be a late bloomer in the sport, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does do that. I mean, he's got talent, he's got the name, he's got the pedigree. I won't be surprised if he does turn up. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah. And actually, just to finally finish it off, I want you all to give me the race this season, because we assume that he will score points at a race this season. Which race is Mick Schumacher going to score his first points in F1 at? I will start with Chinmay, because he looks the most prepared.
I'm not, but but I'll probably go Monza. I don't know.
Monza? Jack?
Let's say France. There's no real reason for it, just France.
Okay, France.
I'm going to say Austria.
Austria. Ooh, interesting ones there. I think all of them could come true, and I think it very much depends on now, especially on what upgrades Haas decide to bring. Right, I have to run off now. Unfortunately, I could only do an hour of the show today, but I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of my co-host Chinmay, as he will dive into the rest of the race. Obviously, what has happened between the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, even the Alpines. Lewis Hamilton, was Ocon right to get that 5-second penalty? And then we'll move on to our predictions and our preview of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in 2 weeks. And just a bit of a mild spoiler alert, Chinmay has done a lot better than me this week on our Monaco Grand Prix predictions, but you will have to wait and see how many points we both score and which ones and what predictions we make for the race in 2 weeks.
And welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. Now it's my turn, Chinmay, to be taking over for the next hour because Will unfortunately had to leave us. But I think we'll just might as well carry on with the race now and just maybe talk about the top four, really, Red Bull and Ferrari, because obviously Red Bull were on the back foot coming into this weekend, but obviously it's ended up them Checo Perez taking his first Monaco win, his third F1 win. Overall, second with Red Bull, and Verstappen completing the podium because of, let's just say, another Ferrari strategic blunder. I think it's that first time we've really seen it this year. And at least Monaco has been sort of a place that's really been dependent on the strategy because you can't overtake on that track. And how costly do you think this mistake can be from Ferrari, Jack?
I mean, it's a tricky one. When you think about it logically, they've lost 7 points swap between... Oh, it's not even that simple, is it? Because Leclerc's the one that's gone from first to fourth, and Sainz has in effect stayed where he is. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a weird one. The strategy seemed to be everyone staying out too late to get onto the inters, and then Sainz staying out throughout the whole thing, and then Ferrari coming in too soon to get on the hards. And I agree with what they did with Sainz because he's been out there longer on the full wets. But why they brought why they brought Leclerc in at the same time, I don't know. It's a bit weird. Clearly they had some information that said was like now is the right time to swap, and clearly that information was wrong because they lost not one but two positions as a result of it as a team. Strange.
Yeah, definitely. Shane, especially with Red Bull, I think Perez has done a good job. Verstappen being on third place. Do you think this is really going to be instrumental in really? It's not just the drivers but constructors now that Red Bull is now taking a significant lead now, especially compared to the first after the first race of the season.
For sure, they were 30 to 44 points behind Ferrari a few races ago, and now they're 30 something points in front. They're just going to keep steamrolling this. They're going to keep gaining points of Ferrari, I'm sure of it. I think Ferrari has lost momentum. They had the momentum from the start. It's very similar to what we saw a couple of years ago in 2018, basically. So, I think, I think Red Bull. Early prediction, but I think Red Bull's going to win this Constructors' Championship.
Fair enough. And I think probably a big part to do with it is probably to do with the upgrades, because Red Bull has been spending a lot of money especially on upgrades. They've been one of the teams that's been most consistently after the minimum weight, because especially with teams seeming to be struggling, and we had that one point where Williams engineers were literally looking to remove all the paint from the car, and Ferrari have been very conservative with it. Do you think really Ferrari should be ramping up the pace now?
Yeah, I think it fits with what we've seen in the last few years. Generally, Red Bull do tend to pick things up towards the end of a championship, and we saw, I think last year it was kind of Hamilton turned it on to try and bring that point that gap back, but I don't think the car difference was any different. But certainly previous years before, as Mercedes started to slow down towards the end of the year, Red Bull would catch up. Whereas Ferrari, especially when they were competing 2018, 2019, would get off to a good start and it would look like we'd have a good championship and then they'd fade away. So yeah, this year they really got to change this around, and if they can't be here waiting to, see how things go. If they want to win this championship, everybody on that team, every single mechanic, strategist, person doing the hosting or PR person has to be behind that, because they've got to be pretty much perfect. Red Bull are a machine. They just do things by the book and it always works. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And the fact that Verstappen's, whenever he finishes a race, he finishes top 2, and I think that's been going on for the last 2 years. That's evidence of that fact. In fact, is that broken? Yeah. Oh no!
Yeah. I mean,
I brought that up.
This year's is the first time he's finished. He's not finished the race and won it, because obviously the other time he hasn't finished first. He DNF because of engine issues. But yeah, it's pretty remarkable, that stat, with just how consistent he is.
He's still on the podium, to be honest. It's not exactly a bad performance for Red Bull, is it?
No.
But yeah, no. They've got to get on that. They've got to get on the upgrades and just make sure everything is working smoothly as a team, because this is their warning shot now. If it keeps going the way it is, as Shane said,
yeah, 100%.
It's done.
Yeah, I don't think I could agree more. Just especially Red Bull, you got Christian Horner. I mean, as much as a lot of people do not like Christian Horner, because he does tend to say a lot of things, and Helmut Marko did say something really, really annoying.
He's such an awful person. So I really hope his words aren't indicative of how he is as a human being, but God, he's such a pain.
Did he hear that? He said Leclerc should be stripped of pole because of the whole Weybridge incident.
I saw.
Ian, the Ferrari actually did nothing wrong there. But I think with Ferrari, just an extra thing as well, just to do with post-race as well, Ferrari lodged a complaint to the FIA about Red Bull with the whole, the exit pit lane. Do you think it was justified for Ferrari to be complaining about that, even though Max did overstep the line a bit to try and take over the win?
If I can give a little bit more detail to that. The thing is, in the regulation, if your tyre is touching the line, you're fine. You haven't crossed it on the pit exit. It's the other way around if you're you're not going into the pits. But in the race steward notes, they'd copied and pasted it so that it said you had to be on the right hand side of the yellow line. So if it was touching it, that would imply that you'd done something at fault. But it was just a minor mistake there, and you can't override what it says in the actual regulation. That was the issue. So Ferrari they said they were putting a protest in, but mainly to gain clarification, because I'm assuming they had understood it as you've got to stay to the right hand side of it. And I don't blame them. We've had so much spice last year with Mercedes and Red Bull. Probably one of the two team bosses would be throwing fists at this point if it was those two teams, so I've no issue with it at all.
Or Toto smashing his headphones again. I keep going back to that incident in Saudi Arabia, just losing $300 or something like that.
And they lost their Bose sponsorship after that.
Yes, they did.
Did they?
Yeah.
Because of that incident?
Well, I'm not sure it's directly because of the incident, but it happened at a questionable time.
F1 conspiracy theories, I love it.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, 100%. We're back at it again.
You beat me to it.
Yeah. And I suppose that's really all there is to it was the Ferrari Red Bull. It's just really the whole thing heating up. And probably just on the side note, do you think we'll see the Leclerc and Verstappen crash? We've probably touched on it before, but
absolutely, yeah. I think we're 100% going to see them crash at some point, and I think multiple times. It seems very calm at the moment, but at the same time, it was still quite calm around this point last year, and they were Hamilton and Verstappen. Yes, there was a few like bumps and tire rubs or whatever, but towards the end of the season, that's when it started to become a problem, if you would say that. And I think they 100% will crash, and on multiple occasions.
So I think the relationship between those two is decent. It's not like they aren't friends as such. It's not like you're going to rip that away from people, the same way that you might if it was I don't know, Norris and Sainz, for example. I'm just struggling to think of that really tight knit, but they're also not so far apart that there's this ego thing that comes in, right? They both have respect of what each other has earned. So even if there's an accident, I think they'll both take it well. I can see it going that way. I can see I do think it's possible that they'll get at each other's throats the way we saw last year, but I don't think it's likely.
Okay, fair enough. So I think we might as well just go into a quick break before we basically just can talk about notable performances. So we'll probably talk about the Alpine drivers, Lewis Hamilton, the whole penalty, and also just look at midfield in general. And we are back. So I think now we'll just quickly run through the running order, just point out a few pinpoint performances. I think just going from the top down, I think Checo and Sainz, they pretty much didn't put foot wrong all race. I mean, Sainz was really good with overpowering Ferrari strategies. The Ferrari master plan did not fool Sainz as much as Leclerc. I mean, do you think this could be a bounce back for Sainz now after what has been a very shoddy couple of races?
I mean, it's possible. He needs to build that confidence, and I mean, he's done okay there. I think consistency is so hard to say. He's going to keep doing well. Even having those 2-3 crashes has put him how many points behind? He's 80. He's on 80 points or something like that, and then the winners are 100 plus. So he's far enough behind that unless he really steps it up, he's not going to be in the championship anymore. And that's just what lack of consistency will do for you. But I think he needs to understand he's now the second driver, and he needs to put in performances that are worth that. Worth his team keeping him on and help his team more.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think on the other hand, we've got the other second driver that's going to be really pinpoint in the top two against constructor, Sergio Perez, especially after pulling off a really good win. Do you think he can really play a part in the championship, really actually take part in it? He's only 15 points behind now after this win, with 110, 6 points behind Leclerc. So do you think he could really...
I so want to believe he can, but I just think Red Bull will not view it that way. I think they want... Obviously, Max is the faster driver. He's the better driver. And he's the one which they can trust to take the fight to Leclerc. And I think the way Red Bull works, they will want to put their eggs in the Verstappen basket. And although Perez has been performing so well that I would so not want to see that. I would so want to see the two Red Bulls fighting each other, Leclerc fighting them, and Sainz maybe if he starts putting in his good performances as he did yesterday, he could also be there. It could be a four-way. Not a four-way fight for the championship, but a four-way fight for race wins. But your question was, would Checo be able to participate in the championship? And I'm sorry to say, I probably don't think he could.
Do you have anything to say on that?
No, I think you've put it fairly well. I think he'll be able to throw a spanner in the works as much as possible, but it's difficult to say. Verstappen's so talented. I just think at any point when you put those two in the same car, he's just not going to be able to compete.
Fair enough. I think we pretty much talked about Leclerc. He's not really putting a foot wrong. I think he's just a victim of the Monaco curse. At least this time he's actually managed to finish the race, but I think his curse just fell through this weekend. How do you think he's faring? Do you think this will really take a confidence knock off for him?
It will for sure take a confidence knock. He lost a win at his home Grand Prix through no fault of his own. But when you look back at the whole season, he really hasn't put a foot wrong apart from in Imola, obviously. The other races, his car was probably a bit weaker than Red Bull, where he's lost and got in second place. But the Monaco Grand Prix, he didn't put a foot wrong. He just got Ferrari absolutely did not do him well with that two-stop, which was I don't know what they were thinking. It was a terrible strategy.
Yeah, like I said, Ferrari master plan.
It's something else. Yeah, I think Leclerc, he's been doing okay. There's nothing really wrong with what he's been doing beyond the obvious mistakes, which aren't, they're small in actual mistake level, but high in consequence. And that's the thing about the World Championship, is even those small mistakes, if they have big consequences, you've got to avoid them. And in some ways, his pace does seem to have fallen off. It's just him taking that down 2% to avoid those mistakes. It feels like it's lost that edge that he really had. The first 3 races of the year, I would have backed nobody but him for the World Championship, and now I would look absolutely dumb if I made that statement.
Yeah, fair enough. And we'll quickly brush past Russell, because to be honest, he's not doing anything wrong. Another top 5 finish, the most consistent driver on the grid. He's become from Mr. Saturday to Mr. Consistency, and
still can't get any attention on him though. He still just slides beneath the surface.
He does.
It seems like that's his curse.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's pretty much outmatching Lewis Hamilton at the moment. I mean, last year we did see Lewis's unfortunate crash with Magnussen, but he's still a recovery driver. But just in general, he's just really been taking the upper hand to Lewis Hamilton at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I think whilst Lewis has obviously had some bad luck, George Russell, he has been performing exceptionally. He's been qualifying extremely well, which they say in Formula 1, you make your own luck. If you qualify well, you avoid the incidents behind you. So at the end of the day, he's been bringing Mercedes up to third in the constructors, but I wouldn't say Lewis Hamilton has done much wrong apart from maybe his qualifying performance being a bit weaker, but his race pace is incredible, and he's just getting caught up in these instances which are not really his fault.
Yeah. And I think, and also another very consistent driver, Lando Norris, finishing in 6th in Monaco, and apart from the first race of the season, he's pretty much finished in points all the rest, other than Bahrain, obviously, because that shocker, and this McLaren being all over the place because their midfield is so close. I mean, do you think McLaren can push for the podiums later in the year if they're able to continue this momentum, this upwards?
Nah, it feels like they're too far away from the top 6. I think there's a big gap between first and second and maybe some other teams, but it seems like the best that Norris could do at the moment, and what he is doing, is just taking him up to that 7th, 8th place and just keeping him away from being churned through 13th and 12th and just not getting any further in a race. The difference between taking 5th position, 7th position in a Grand Prix is big, but the difference between taking 12th and 14th is not, and that's what we're seeing from the 2 McLaren drivers.
Yeah, fair enough. And just quickly moving on now to Alonso, pretty much the slow coach of the entire Grand Prix. Just the fact that he was 3.5 seconds slower than everybody else, still managed P7 to hold up Lewis Hamilton, pretty much also ruining his teammates' race as well by bunching up the whole grid. I mean, I think Alonso just kind of just showed the weaknesses in Monaco there, didn't he?
He did. He just parked the car on the road, basically. Basically made the car park that was from qualifying, and absolutely trolling the entire second half of the grid. It was funny to see, but he really did expose the weaknesses of Monaco. No one could overtake him, even though he was going so slowly. And then when he started to pick up the pace, his tyres were in a good condition, and he could just pull away from everyone.
He had nothing to gain from trying to drive fast, which is an absolutely insane thing to have to say about Formula One.
Yeah, I think it's the only race of the season where you can literally just drive as slow as you like and nothing's going to happen to you. And I feel this will be a good time to actually bring this up now. Another one of the big events was Esteban Ocon and Lewis Hamilton's collision that caused Ocon's 5-second penalty, and he ended up, even though he did cross the line P9, he ended up being demoted to P12 because of that 5-second penalty. Do you think that was a just penalty? With the
thing is, I've only seen the incident like once in real time and once in slow-mo because the race direction just didn't show it.
Yeah.
They talked about putting him in the wall and there was no wall there, so I don't know if there was another collision. That's what I thought initially, and then we saw that Hamilton had front left damage, but they didn't show that on replay either. I have no idea. I can't comment. I just don't have the information because they didn't bother showing it. It was frustrating, and I guess, you know, I literally haven't seen it more than twice 24 hours ago, so I'm not going to make a judgment on that, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, did you manage to see it?
I did. Well, from what I saw, it was a very clear push into the pit wall, and it was so he ran over his the front left end plate of Hamilton, and Hamilton rubbed against the pit wall for a little bit. And that's why as Jack said, I didn't see that happen at all, and I was wondering why Hamilton has such bad front wing damage. And I did not know that even happened throughout the whole race. So obviously 2 accidents happened between Ocon and Hamilton, and I thought the damage was from the first accident.
Yeah, same. Because we did see the first one, the one bit in Saint-Devote, didn't we? Yeah. That was the first one that was shown, but there was the second one that caused the incident.
Yeah, so there was the second time.
That was the second time.
Okay, alright, fine. Good. I'm glad there was a second time. That makes more sense in my mind, but I still didn't see it. Just
because they didn't show the second time.
Yeah, bizarre.
Because I think also they didn't show Gasly's overtake on Magnussen, I believe, and I think that there's also
they didn't show Magnussen retiring.
Yep.
The whole time,
and they didn't show Russell overtaking Norris, which apparently was a very good move.
Yeah, because I remember Russell saying it because they had that race reactions now on YouTube, which I really like watching. It's just like Russell was just talking about how he did a really good move on Norris and how fantastic it was. Oh look, we didn't see a second of it. Oh well, can't really do much about that.
Yep.
I didn't think we'd be having this conversation after last year, because last year, you know, everybody noticed, but this year it feels like the same mistakes are happening. It's just there's other things to distract us. They should have picked it up in that time.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, then we got and then pretty much running at the top 10, we got Bottas in P9, being able to go up a couple of positions is always great in Monaco, and Sebastian Vettel having another points finish. I think those are 2 pretty decent performances. There's not really much to say about that, is there?
The Alfa Romeos look like a good car, but I think it's had a bit of a weakness in Monaco, but overall, over the season, the Alfa Romeos look good. Bottas has been able to compete. Bottas is performing very well. Vettel's been driving very well as well. So, not much to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Gasly P11, Ocon P12. We just mentioned about the whole penalty, which is still a mystery because I don't know if we're ever going to see a replay of that for the rest of our lives. And probably the last person I really want to talk about is Danny Ricciardo, because especially with the whole thing with Zach Brown hinting earlier this weekend about all the mechanisms that he has to replace Ricciardo, and Ricciardo's just not been there. He's been nowhere near Norris all this last 2 years. He's
not been there for a few years, I think. When he was at Renault, he was doing better than Ocon, but Ocon was new into the F1, and he had a couple good performances, but he's still in a decent car. Now, even last year, he was in a decent car and he just didn't perform.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've not been I like him as a person, but I've not been a fan of him as a driver for a while. And in some ways, it's the worst feeling ever to be vindicated in that, because I do want him to do well. But yeah, it's just that 2/10. 2/10 last year meant nothing, because the top 4 was so far clear of everyone else. But there is no pecking order in the midfield anymore. I couldn't put a name on any of the cars, probably from 4th to 9th. And being 2 tenths behind, and that means everything.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you really think that Ricciardo could be dropped at the end of the season if this is what we're seeing from Ricciardo this year?
What a shocking season Ricciardo's having. But he will not be dropped mid-season. McLaren would not do that to him. We were speaking earlier, and I think he's got a 3-year contract, is that right?
Yeah, his contract expires at the end of next year.
At the end of next year, okay. And I believe that contract will be broken at the end of this year, and he will be replaced. Who knows by? There's lots of drivers to choose from. So
there's a few options right now. We got obviously Oscar Piastri from Alpine if McLaren are able to snatch him, because depending if Alonso stays for another season, and you got Colton Herta, Pato O'Ward. You got who else could really realistically go for McLaren?
I mean, I think Van Dorn is a test driver for them. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's it realistically. I hope Piastri gets a seat at Alpine, but if they keep Alonso into his, getting towards his mid-40s, then I suppose that would be a good outlet for him.
Yeah, I think especially with McLaren probably be the second best option for Piastri right now, and I think probably got Stroll, Latifi, and Joe running it, and Tsunoda. Tsunoda had dropped down quite quick. He started 11th, didn't he? Or something like that.
I think he started higher than that. I might be wrong. Maybe I'm thinking someone else. Oh no, I'm thinking Schumacher. Schumacher was in Q3 and then wasn't he? And then
Tsunoda did finish 11th. No, sorry, not finished 11th. Qualified 11th.
He qualified 11th, but that 11th was actually reached by Gasly, because Gasly, he actually put out quite a couple of good overtakes, which we actually managed to see. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that full train, nobody got to reach their potential. Some things happened in the pit stops, but we weren't really concentrating on that, and then nothing else happened in the second half of the race. So I wouldn't put too much stock on this race's performance, at least for him. But in general, he's not been much compared to Gasly. Yeah,
and then probably we had Albon having a DNF. Do you know what the reason was, Albon's?
I think he was last, and even if it was just like a minor thing, I think he just gave up, basically.
Yeah, fair enough. I think obviously Mick Schumacher, we had that whole accident, and Magnus had a water leak. So then those were our 3 DNFs of the race. And probably just side note, Latifi crashing under the safety car. He's just...
Don't solely put the spotlight on Latifi. Stroll also crashed under the safety car.
Yes,
at the start.
But Latifi was pretty much... I think Stroll he nudged the wall, but then Latifi straight out crashed on the carousel. Yeah.
I went for Lou. I was like, this isn't getting started for another couple of minutes.
Going back he gave us a bit of comic relief at least.
I mean, he's not the only driver to have done it in the last couple of years. Perez did it at Spa last year. Verstappen did it at Hungary 2 years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, there are far better drivers that have done it, but, it's not the first time for him that he's done something really dumb, so...
Well, and it is... the slowest corner in the whole of the F1 calendar, but oh well. And probably just to run things off to do the race, what would you give the race out of 10?
It felt like there was potential there that wasn't achieved, and for that 5. It's probably it was okay.
I'm going to agree with Jack. 5 out of 10, but it was, for Monaco levels, it was a very good race.
Oh yeah, I was expecting a 2 or 3 initially, so yeah.
But yeah, I think as a Monaco standard, we can probably give it 9 out of 10. But I think because it's Monaco, just the second half was just boring. I think I also agree 5 out of 10. So I think that pretty much just rounds it out for the Monaco Grand Prix. And after the break, we will take a little deep preview into Azerbaijan and the Baku street, into another street circuit. Go over our reviews for our predictions and reviews for the Monaco Grand Prix, and make new one and show our new ones for Baku. And for our final stint, we're going to be previewing Azerbaijan. That's our next Grand Prix 2 weeks away. A pretty different track, especially we have the fastest. I think it is still the fastest straight on the entire calendar, right? Jeddah didn't take over, did it?
Yeah. I don't know now.
I believe it should be, because Jeddah
It is a long straight.
Jeddah obviously has high downforce, so it should be.
No, Monza's faster, surely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
Monza's the average. I think Monza's the fastest street circuit, fastest track on the calendar. But I think Baku, I think it has the longest straight. At least it has the longest straight on the calendar for sure, especially with that really long, just down past the government building and stuff like that. But I mean, we've had a few good races. I mean, last year we had the whole incident with Lewis locking up and the two ridiculous tyre failures with Lance Stroll and Max Verstappen, and Sergio Perez taking his second win, his first for Red Bull. I mean, what do you think of the circuit? Do you think it's a great circuit?
I think it's an amazing circuit. I think it just provides that little bit of difference to the F1 calendar, and it has mega long straights and slow speed corners, which is just perfect for these cars to race at. Yeah, these cars work perfectly on this track, and it just provides amazing overtakes and amazing races for the past couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about the track?
It's my second favourite. I like Bahrain more just because nighttime races, they're great. And there's just something about Bahrain that has, I think, unusual character, because it shouldn't be interesting. But in some ways, neither should Baku. It's a street circuit, but it just has the intangibles, right? It's crazy where it goes and what they're actually allowed to do, and the track itself, the layout is good. There are bits that are a bit kind of samey, if you see what I mean. Like, is this corner 3 or corner 4 or whatever else? But in on the whole, it drives well. It looks great. It's interesting, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of changes, then the only change they're making this year is to do the pit entry, because it's a pretty scary pit entry. Cause
it is straight off the straight, isn't it?
Straight off the straight, and it's literally like a massive chicane style entry. I can't remember what the changes are. They're making some changes to basically make it less scary, especially after the criticism from Nico Rosberg, I think, was very vocal about that entry in particular. But I think, especially we've had, like I said last year, and in 2020 we've had was a half decent race. 2018 we had the whole overtake with Danny Ricciardo overtaking 3 cars, which is still one of the best overtakes of all time. 2017 we had an interesting race where Bottas stole the podium stole second place from Martin Stroll, I believe, right at the line. So I mean, yeah, it's a pretty good track. Are you expecting a good race, I suppose? And I suppose we can move on to our predictions. So obviously, me and Bo are doing our prediction competition, and heading into Monaco, it was 20-19 to Will. But this week, it's about to change. Because
you're so smug about this, aren't you?
I'm very smug, because I never have confidence in this, so I'm never really good at predictions, I'm not going to lie. But I think this week, for our podiums, Will put Verstappen, Sainz and Hamilton, and I put Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton. So Will did get 2 points, I believe. Yeah, because look, Perez won, and then Verstappen was third, right?
Yes, but Sainz was in the right place.
Yeah,
so we'll get 3 points, and then what we
4. He'll get 4, and I got 1 point for that.
Oh, you get 3. You get 3 points for being in the right place, don't you?
Yeah, 3 for being in the right place, and obviously we also got Verstappen on the podium, so he has 4. Whereas I only got Verstappen, who's the only person, but he finished third, not first, so I only got 1 point. But then with the actual 1 point predictions, Will predicted Bottas qualifies top 6, but I think he was out in Q2, wasn't he?
He was.
So, but I put and I put Russell continues there's top 5 run, which I did, so I got the point. The second point, Will put less than 5 on track overtakes. I believe there was about 5 or 6.
There was a couple.
There were. I think Gasly coming through from the back really helped out there. I think. Did we decide that there were? He said fewer than 5.
He said fewer than 5. I think they'll.
Do we need to? I think provisionally we say there were more than 5. I think it didn't help that, again, Russell versus Norris we didn't see, and some of the Gasly overtakes we didn't see either. So
yeah, I think also there was a Vettel overtake as well. So yeah,
so we need to go back and rewatch the whole race and just count them.
Yeah, no, but there's no point because half of them aren't even on TV.
Yeah, helpful.
So, but I put Leclerc does not crash in any competitive session, so I think that gives me 2 points. That means so far that puts 4 points each this week, and then for our 3-pointer. Will kind of predicted a sort of 96 Monaco style thing when he predicted less than 12 cars finished the race, but 17 did, because Tsunoda, I believe, was the last person to finish. So that, but I put Perez and Sainz actually physically crash into each other at some point in the weekend. So
yeah, I mean you've really, that's such a cheeky one to get right, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah, obviously, the end of qualifying, Perez went onto the wall and Sainz crashed into him, which is like, oh, you're so lucky.
I was very lucky with that one, but I'm still trying to comprehend how I made the prediction at that time. But yeah, so I think looking at the scores, that will mean I take the lead with 26 to 24.
And then they were the only two of the top 8 or 10 that would actually crash into each other as well, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean Ocon and Hamilton, I suppose, but certainly if the top 4 or 6.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think we'll move on to now quickly move on to our Baku predictions. So this week Jack is pretty much subsidising for Will. So
yeah, I mean he left and he just said, I want to make that one prediction, and that's just the word chaos. So that's in there, but didn't give me any more warning than that. So if I get this right, he better be thankful. Do you want me to kick things off then?
Yeah, might as well start with the podium.
Okay, I've gone for, I think it's going to be a Red Bull track. I think everyone knows it's going to be a Red Bull track. High top speed. So I've gone for Verstappen and then Perez. And then I was just feeling a bit creative because Will's not here to boo me down, so I put Russell third.
Fair enough. We went for, me and Shane teamed up, we got something similar. Verstappen, Perez and Norris.
Oh, okay. I was being interesting.
Being a bit wacky. I thought,
You gotta throw in a bit of spice in there. So.
Yeah, especially if I have some weeks I've been very, very safe in my predictions, so I think might as well just chuck it in there. So what did you put for your 1-pointer then?
There will be chaos. I'm going to say at some point there will be 2 or 3 cars where there is not clear what's going on, either with contact or with pitting or something like that. I'll be very loose about it.
Yeah, chaos and visible confusion.
Sure, we'll go with that.
A shoddy race direction where we can't actually see what's happening.
Yeah, we can count that. And then I just put has points finish. So
yeah, fair enough.
Pretty. And then what do you put for your 2-pointer?
The Ferraris are going to race each other on track, and it's going to lose them time to someone else.
Okay.
That's kind of a bit broad again, but I think it'll be fairly clear if that does happen.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's pretty much the first of that kind of prediction we've had all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very defined.
Yeah, no, but fair enough. That's a pretty good one, actually. I just put Leclerc crash into the castle section. I mean, he's done it about 3 times already. I wouldn't be surprised if he does it again.
Yeah, do you mean it throughout the weekend or
any time in the weekend? Okay. To be honest, but yeah, I think it's bound to happen at some point. That. Well, he's gonna need his Monaco curse to come through at some point because it didn't.
I mean, I think was he not cursed enough already with the pit stops?
No, as in the DNF curse he has.
Well, and the historic one, yeah. Sure. Maybe it's it'll rub off onto the next race as well.
Probably just a combination of the 2 races. The curse just splits in half. But that guy has some ridiculous curse going to. I feel so sorry for him though, honestly. And so what did he put for your 3-pointer?
Norris finishes the race behind Ricciardo, so that requires him to finish and for Ricciardo to be ahead of him. If he has an incident and gets back on track and keeps going, I'm counting that as being correct.
Okay, so Norris beats Norris on pace.
Not necessarily on pace. There might be something wrong, but Norris finishes and is behind Ricciardo.
Yeah. Okay, in the race, basically, we're just not really counting a DNF, are we? But Yeah, and I just put there's going to be multiple tyre failures during the race. I'm going to keep it just to the race, keep it a proper 3-pointer.
You just throw him back to last year, you mean?
Yeah, literally just throw it back to the...
Multiple tyre failures?
Multiple.
So 2 or more?
Yes.
Okay.
Just, I think one is a bit much of a 2-pointer, and I thought, spice it up a little bit.
If there's a collision and the tyre rubs, cuts down a tyre, does that count? Or do you mean like just on its own?
An actual tyre fails on its own.
Blimey, alright. That's
You're making life
bold.
hard for yourself.
Yeah, why not? But
that's definitely a 3-point prediction.
Yeah, I thought, why not? Actually, especially not my ability not do very out there predictions. I'm not very good at that sort of stuff, so why not?
No, that's bold.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that kind of rounds up what we need to discuss in Monaco. Pretty much a very eventful Monaco Grand Prix, despite expectations.
Yeah, I think it was periods of events and then periods of no events, but
yeah, first half was on Monaco and second half was textbook Monaco. Just signs. It's like watching Sainz stuck behind Perez looking to overtake where he just can't because it's Monaco. But yeah, we've looked into Azerbaijan, we've gone through the predictions, and yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week. And next week will be my turn to host. What it'll be about, we'll find out next week, I suppose. But yeah, this is me, Chinmay Barachas, signing off for today. Thank you for coming on to the Jack.
You are welcome, anytime.
And Shane, thank you for coming on this week as well.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, so this is the Warwick F1 show, and thank you for listening.